allowing us to hear the House bills. We appreciate your patience.
Basically, the concern that brought this to this bill, if I can, Mr. Sergeant-at-Arms, could you please distribute these with the panel members? A couple of concerns is that the forms that are required by law to be filled out by abortion clinics are being pre-filled out so that they're false. As you all receive them, these forms are stamped and the information put in before the patient is even seen. So these forms say that the medical condition of the abortion at the time of the abortion is, quote, good, unquote. Doesn't give the father's name, doesn't give the residence of the father, doesn't give the parish of the residence, and more importantly, it already has pre-stamped in the procedure that terminated the pregnancy. Well, there's multiple procedures, as we all know, but the answer is already provided before the procedure is performed. The form says, look, there's no complications for the pregnancy before the abortion is performed. It states that the reason for the pregnancy is unknown. All of this is filled out before the patient is even seen. It states that there's no post-abortion procedure that's necessary. It states that nothing is known about the fetal length or the fetal weight. That could be important because it tells us the age of the babies. Are they potentially killing babies that are viable? The forms are systematically being falsified. These forms that are pre-filled out and systematically falsified are from the Delta Abortion Clinic in Baton Rouge. Other concerns, very quickly, is Kermit Gostner. We know who that is. That's the guy in Philadelphia that was performing late-term abortions. The baby would be all the way out of the womb except for the head, and he'd take scissors and snip the spine in half. He's now in prison for murder. Well, there's concerns that Leroy T. Brinkley, who runs the clinic in Baton Rouge, may have been doing business with him. And Mr. Brinkley has had multiple abortion clinics shut down in Louisiana. And when they're shut down, he changes the name and changes location and continues to perform abortion. So that's one of the things. That's another issue that's addressed in the bill, and I'll get to the substance of the bill in very short order. But for example, he's had a myriad of different names for his clinics using variations of the name Delta Clinic. He's purchased abortion clinics under the names of other persons, including Nancy Meyer, and
One question, point of order from Senator Luno.
Yep.
Can we talk about the bill?
Sure,
We don't need
let's
all
do
this
that.
background information. It's 20 minutes after 1. We have
Let's
a
do that.
mandatory meeting at 2 o'clock. Let's talk about the bill.
And I would ask Mr. Russo, would you please join the table, because there's some things I'd like some clarity on as we talk about. And members, there is an amendment that we will consider, and I'd like Mr. Russo involved. So yeah, let's talk about the bill.
Okay.
Let's talk about
Basically,
what the
makes it
mechanism
a
does.
crime to perform an abortion in an unlicensed facility. States that the DA and the AG and the governor all have standing to enjoin and permanently close an abortion clinic if there's underage abortions being performed, if they're intentionally destroying records, or the systematic falsification of records. By the way, these records that we show were false, pre-filled out and falsified, they're required by law to be kept so that the LDH has some record of what's going on in the abortion industry in Louisiana. That's a regulatory requirement. This bill also gives the DA, the AG, and the governor the standing to review and inspect the paperwork. It states that destruction of the documents relating to the documentation of the abortions by either the state through the DH or by the abortion clinic is a crime. It states that public employees shall be subject to malfeasance if they failure to enforce licensing rules and regulations. It states that an owner or operator of an abortion clinic who loses his license under this section or is subject to criminal prosecution shall be permanently barred from ownership or interest in an abortion clinic. So you can't be shut down in one place and go across the street, change your names, and go right back into business.
Senator Milkovich, let me just stop you there. We did pass legislation many years ago that basically said, I handled the legislation, that if an entity was revoked and they lost their license, those people of that LLC corporation could not open another one up. There's no way. They cannot open it up. And if it's been done, that is in law, that they can't come up with another LLC. If it's the same members of a different LLC, that's not allowable. Has that been done, Mr. Russo?
Steve Russo, Executive Counsel, Louisiana Department of Health. To my knowledge, I'm pretty sure it's been done on the certification side, definitely. So where if you're excluded from Medicaid, you cannot enter into another Medicaid agreement. I'm gonna look behind me and.
Okay, because we may have to brush off that legislation.
Yes,
And I wanted to
they're
take your
nodding
same
their head
line of
behind
thought.
me. Yes, they're nodding their heads behind me, Chairman Mills, that it is in our licensing laws as well.
Well, and I don't know if it's not being enforced because
That's what I'm
Leroy
trying to
T.
figure out.
Leroy T. Brinkley has keeps
So we do have laws on the books. I wanted that to be known to the department.
And actually, what this does, this goes to another level. So, number one, as a matter of fact, my understanding, based upon Richard Mahoney, who's been doing research of the abortion cartel for over 35 years, states that Brinkley is reopening in Louisiana, even though his past clinics have been shut down. So that is happening, and he's in operation right now. He's the owner of Delta Abortion Clinic. I don't think you're denying that. And one of the things that this law does is it said that the members of the LDH would be subject to malfeasance if they failed to enforce licensing rules and regulations. So this gives us some, it gives us some enforcement. Also, what has happened, Delta Clinic was the subject of a series of television, an expose by Julie Baxter, and I'm sure, Chairman, you know Julie Baxter. I think she maybe worked for the governor's office. She blew them sky high, showing that that their clinics were filthy, that they were using the same instruments in abortion after abortion, that serious injuries, that the level of medical care was abhorrent, and she exposed it. Guess what happened? Nothing. They're still there. Julie Baxter did a story, but the LDH did not come in and shut them down. One of the things that this bill does, it says that 3 public officials have the authority to come in and shut down an abortion clinic if it's violating the law by doing underage abortions, intentional destruction, or falsification of records. That's the DA, the AG, and the governor. That's the local DA. So it gives more entities standing to intervene. It also gives all of those 3 entities, and this is new, standing to review and inspect the paperwork on the abortions. So that's, and I do have...
We do have some questions. Why don't we open up for questions, because I think everybody's read the bill. Why don't we open for questions? There are some amendments that was asked from either Department or Governor's office for us to consider. So why don't we open up for questions, and let's throw out the amendments and see what we go from there. Senator Claytor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Milkovich, I think I understand what you're trying to do on page 12, on page 1, line 12. As far as the civil cause of action against the abortion clinic, the district attorney in the parish in which an outpatient clinic is located, the attorney general or the governor may petition the court for an injunction. In this district, the district attorney doesn't have any civil duties like you see in a lot of other places. He's just a prosecutor.
Is that by law or is that by practice?
That's by law, and I think that's the case in Orleans Parish as well. But I can't be 100% sure for that. So I get the idea of you're trying to empower a couple of different people to move forward.
Because it's our contention that the LDH hasn't done
anything.
And I'm not faulting Mr. Is it Mr. Russo?
Well,
Yes, it is.
no, I hear what you're saying, but this concept of a couple of different people being to step over one another on it, and some of the district attorneys not having any authority at all, I would suggest that you consider maybe the attorney general would be the right one in all the instances. In that way, we have one person instead of 3 people, or if you think it's the proper authority of the governor, we're going to have potentially competing people with different ideas and outcomes, where in the criminal law, which this is in Title 40, it's not the criminal law.
Right.
In the criminal law, the district attorney has the authority to do that. I think you have a relationship with a former district attorney, and so I just want you to consider that I think
Sure.
that creates a unclear pecking order in who has the authority, and would suggest that you're better served by choosing one. As far as that then translates into the next page, as far as who has standing, on page 2, in addition to the authority of the department, the district attorney in any parish is located, the attorney general, the governor shall have standing to review and inspect or conduct discovery in all forms, where maybe the attorney general is the right one for this. But
The answer, if I can, very quickly, because I know we're rocking on time here, but
we're
for example,
we're talking
on
about the bill, though.
Right, I understand. There are other instances in the law where there's multiple persons that have standing. For example, the superintendency of the Department of Education, there's at least 4 public officials that have the authority to say, look, a superintendent of the Department of Education is serving in violation of law. That's the DA, the AG, the governor, and president of the Senate. The other thing is, as Mr. Bourgeois is here to attest to, multiple complaints have been made about the condition and the practices of these abortion clinics to multiple public officials over a long period of time. And there's a
Nothing
concern,
happened.
nothing happened. I mean, Julie Baxter put it on front, you know.
I understand, and that, but
The
I'm
ex-
still saying that it creates an issue. So I'm going to leave it alone at this point. But
Sure.
I'm not comfortable with it that way. But I understand frustration of when you present evidence and nothing happens.
And
That's
I will
frustrating.
Is it, now, Mr. Bourgeois, was it hundreds or thousands of these forms that were falsified? That
It was 1,000 on minors.
Well, I know, but let's really stay to the bill if we could, because we have to be out of here in the next 15 minutes. No ifs, ands, or buts, and I want this to get a good hearing.
Thank you.
Mr. Russo, tell us, from the investigation standpoint to either final revocation or whatever, I guess my concerns is, where do you stand from the standpoint that we've done all we can do and here's the handoff? Or how do you see this?
Yeah, I mean, here's kind of the way the process works now is the department, we will get a complaint either from a concerned citizen or however it'll come in. We'll then refer that complaint out to the health standards section within the department. The health standards section will triage that complaint to determine whether they need to do an on-site survey. Is it something that they can do just by record review or whatnot? If they do go on site, they will go out on site, make a request for whatever documents that might be relevant to the complaint that was made. Then they will make a determination as to whether any deficient practice has occurred at that clinic. And if so, they will recommend a potential fine, sanction, plan of correction at that facility. If we have reason to believe that a crime has been committed, like destruction of records or potential late-term abortion that would not be legal or something of that nature, we will notify the local DA and the Attorney General's office.
Very good. We do have members, the board is clear right now, and we do have amendments that were submitted to myself from the department and the governor's office for us to consider. Did it get distributed, Ms. Peck, to everybody? Does everybody have a copy? 3142? Ms. Peck, why don't you explain, because I know this was kind of a late night amendment, so why don't you explain what...
I might go get
what we
a
have?
copy. Is that
Please, please.
Mr. Chairman and members, my appreciation of the amendments that were submitted is the governor's office wanted to be respectful of the issue regarding falsifying documents, deliberately falsifying, destroying documents, and pre-filling predating documents. But aside from those two conditions, everything else is being stripped out of the bill with this set of amendments. This standing to the district attorney, the attorney general, or the governor, all of that language is being removed, and all of the conditions identified on page 2 are being removed except for the falsification or pre-filling of documents.
I would like for Mr. Bourgeois to have a few seconds. I know been important legislation. I do want to make one correction that, according to an Alliance Defense Fund, there were some changes made by the LDH, and I stand corrected on this. According to an ADF letter from June 17, 2010, A 99 investigation by WAFB TV in Baton Rouge revealed extensive violations of the sanitary code and other existing regulations, which led ultimately to the suspension of Delta Clinic physicians and the enactment of new abortion industry regulatory provisions. My understanding, wasn't Mr. Brinkley the owner then, and he still is?
Yeah.
At Delta?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Mr. Brinkley's still doing business in Louisiana. So I do want to commend the LDH for doing some things, but we want to make clear that if he's shut down, he needs to leave the state. He needs to be shut down.
And I want to look at the legislation because we worked really hard on making sure that these characters could not open up a new LLC. So I'd like to look at that legislation.
Chairman Mills, I need to go back and look. I'm not sure whether or not this individual actually owns the clinic or is the doctor that is performing the abortions at the.
We had worked really hard to make sure
License
that
holder.
clinic could not be reopened by the same cast of characters. So,
That hadn't happened.
yes, sir, please.
If Mr. Bourgeois could
Please.
address that quickly. Go ahead.
No, that hasn't happened. You can't permanently shut down an abortion clinic in Louisiana, unfortunately, by permanently shutting it down.
You can't revoke a license
Yeah,
permanently?
you can, but you got to get DHH to do it.
I think they've done it. Hadn't y'all
Well-
revoked some licenses
Well, why is
permanently?
he still operating?
Well, we have revoked licenses, Mr. Chairman,
Well,
but
let-
I believe you might have a constitutional issue if you do it forever.
Okay. Yes,
I
sir.
have been doing this work pro bono for the last 14 years. I have news articles going back to 2011 with comments from Mr. Russo and other people from DHH about what's going on. And all we've ever been trying to do is get somebody to investigate this, and then you'll find out if what the document says about itself coincides with what Mr. Russo says about it. Okay? Law against,
Is Brinkley still in operation, yes or no?
yeah, he's still in operation. Filing or maintaining false public records, revised statute 14:133. If you file or maintain false public records, that is a felony crime that is a $5,000 fine and or 5 years in prison with or without hard labor. A couple of years ago, well, on April 28th, 2016, the DEQ reported a person, a man named Dobard, for falsifying one record, and they had him prosecuted. If he is convicted, he's going to jail for 5 years, $5,000. This is 1,000.
Where'd you get the records? Tell them how you got them.
The records came from the abortion clinic itself. They threw them away. That's been in the newspaper. They threw them over onto the public side of the curb. DHH should have a copy of the same document, and if DHH says in the paper, like, that the records no longer exist, well, it's a felony if you destroy any kind of document from the government without getting an SSARC 930 form request to destroy it from the Secretary of State's office. When I called them about it, they said they have no SS 930 ARC from DHH to destroy those. And this is evidence that can be used in child sex slave trafficking and pedophile cases. These 1,000 cases can still be tried because the document, the retention schedule for the document was changed last year by the Secretary of State to coincide with the statute of limitations on child sex crimes, which is 30 years after the person turns 18.
Well, what we will do is, it's so noted. I know Senator
I am
Milkovich
telling
is-
you, there is a mountain of
Well-
documented evidence, and including this.
I'm not refuting it, but I'm trying to stay on the bill. What you're putting into record, we will work with Senator Milkovich, and we will report that to the right authorities.
Okay, but hang on. This is what I found out last night. The Legislative Auditor's Office already has the authority to investigate situations regarding records retention and the Public Information Act, which is where most of the wrongdoing is going on here.
We will report that to the legislative auditor, so noted.
Well,
We will do it, and we will get you involved.
yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I would say this, Mr. Chairman, and I hope I'm not jumping in. I don't have the standing to object since I'm not on the panel, but I think you all are telling me that amendments 3142 came from the governor's office or are being urged by the governor's office? Is that what some?
We received it yesterday from the governor's office, yes.
Okay.
And now we do have, let's just hold your thought for a second.
Sure.
Senator Clayton may have something he'd like to add to the final discussion points. And we do have one person in opposition that would like to speak.
Okay.
It's all yours.
All right, on the amendments, the set offered by the governor's office, has the chair offered them?
I didn't yet. I was just letting us debate it. I've not offered them yet.
And I appreciate that the author's not excited about them, but sometimes we accept amendments that we're excited about to keep the process rolling. And so sometimes I have opposed an amendment, not been very excited about it, but it kept it, and I was happy with what I got at the end as opposed to nothing. So I'm going to make the motion now to,
Except 3142?
yes.
3142, a motion has been made by Senator Clater. Is there any opposition within the committee? Seeing no opposition, 3142 has been adopted to the bill.
Okay, so I think that puts in the proper form to hear from the opposition, and
And,
maybe
and,
the
yeah, and also,
opposition
I
has
do
gone
want to
away.
go on record, and I think it's incumbent upon me to go to record. I'm totally against the governor's amendment. It guts a bill that allows multiple officials to shut down abortion clinics, which are running like slaughterhouses. I mean,
Well, and now you get the floor to say that on, and if your bill gets out of here.
And you
what's that
can-
now?
And you can always strip it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
does
Thank
it-
you.
does
Could
the
I make one last
opposition still
point?
here?
One last point here. It's a national study. On September 11th, it says shock study. 55% of sex trafficking victims become pregnant and are forced into abortions.
So noted. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
and
you.
there's a whole, this comes from former senior advisor on trafficking in persons for the U.S. Department of State and founder of the nonprofit Global
You're losing a
Centurion,
quorum, John.
Laura Lederer.
Thank you. Ms. Snyder, did you want to testify? Ms. Snyder? Please. Thank
Did
you
you
for
see
your
the amendment?
patience.
Ma'am, did you get it?
Yeah, I received it just now. Thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, hi. My name is Megan Snyder, and I really appreciate you allowing me the time to speak today. I know we're on a short schedule. I'm an attorney who represents reproductive health clinics in Louisiana. I wanted to first bring back to some conversations that we were having earlier in the day with respect to various bills that were under consideration. I've heard from this committee that there is concern that there are proper processes in place in various bills, concern for patient protection and privacy, and also concern over unnecessary litigation costs. And with that in mind, to proceed and tell you some of the issues that I take with this bill, I believe even as amended, and I will continue, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to address those or get you further information. This bill expands the prosecutorial and investigative authority of state actors, such as the Attorney General, that law enforcement can target clinics with permanent closure for things like minor documentation errors.
Could I, Senator Clayton would like to say one thing while you're talking, if you
Yes.
don't mind.
No, I was just going to say that your statement was correct before the amendments, but it is not correct after the amendment.
Thank you. Noted. One of the points I'd like to make, SB 325 puts patient privacy at risk. It allows search of patient records without proper procedure, so there's no cause or notice requirement. Patients should not have fear that their sensitive data would be government without their consent and without any safeguards in place. And I believe even with the amendment, there are issues relevant to the documents that are on site, so I would like to bring that to the attention of the committee. And additionally, because of that, among other issues, SB 325 raises serious Fourth Amendment problems and abortion-related bills, it will again lead to costly litigation in the state. I would also finally just wrap up and state that this is brought among other bills that we discuss as cumulative effects, meaning that this bill cannot be viewed alone in a silo. This bill has to be viewed in conjunction with other anti-choice, anti-abortion legislation that's been promoted by the committee, and so that all of these together do create a cumulative undue burden. And for that reason, we do anticipate that if this legislation goes forward, that it will be challenged in court, therefore resulting in legal fees. So I would just like to wrap up and say respectfully, I appreciate you hearing me. Again, lack of process, lack of patient privacy, and litigation costs are a concern in this bill. And respectfully, I'll submit that. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for waiting. Thank you. We appreciate that. Senator Milkovich, would you like to close?
In 3 minutes. That's what we got left, if we have that much time. Just about everything she said is wrong. These forms do not contain the patient's name. She says that these are minor documentation errors. Totally untrue. These pro-life advocates found thousands of these that were pre-filled and systematically falsified in boxes sitting outside of the Delta Women's Clinic, and that needs to be public record. So that is false. The other thing, and this is a moral, maybe an issue of moral judgment, she says the cost. Well, I guess in Louisiana, and we're not ashamed of this, we actually put a value on human life. It's the abortion industry, I understand. They're all about money. They don't do these abortions for free. As soon as it becomes economically inviolable and they're not making blood money on killing babies, they're out of business as quickly as any insolvent Jiffy Lube, Dunkin' Donuts, or lube shop. They're all about the money. But we're about babies, and we're willing to spend money to protect the unborn. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you, members, hearing us out. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen to our concerns.
Thank you. In support, Ms. Friana Trappini, Mike Bourgeois, who's testified, and Christy Cross. In opposition, Megan Snyder and Michelle Ehrenberg. What is the pleasure of the committee? We have a motion to move SB 325 to report with amendments. Is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, it is reported with amendments. And moved to adjourn by Senator Chabert. And thank you all so much. Y'all did a yeoman's job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members. Thank you very much.
And if any